the Cartographer of Isolation. Don Salvatore sat in the shadows of his mahogany-lined study, a glass of amber liquid sweating against his palm. The silence of the mansion was heavy, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock that sounded like a countdown. Most men in position feared death, but Salvatore feared being seen. Across his face, a jagged ridge of scar tissue ran from his left temple down to his jawline, a permanent souvenir of the night his own brother had turned a blade against him. It was a mark of shame that had turned him into a recluse, ruling his empire through fear and proxies. He rarely stepped into the light, and never allowed anyone to look him in the eye for longer than a second. His face was a map of betrayal. Today, however, he required a service that his wealth could not automate. He needed his bespoke suits mended, garments that cost more than most men made in a year. But he could not go to a tailor's shop, and he certainly couldn't have a judgmental stranger staring at his deformity. He needed someone who could see with their hands, someone whose eyes wouldn't linger on the wreckage of his face. The arrival of Elena. Luca, his most trusted advisor, stood at the door. The woman is outside Don Salvatore. Her name is Elena. She comes highly recommended. They say her hands are guided by ghosts. Salvatore took a slow sip of his drink. And the condition? Luca nodded. She has been blind since the age of 7. She won't see the scar, boss. Salvatore set the glass down. Bring her in. But tell the guards if she so much as mentions the word accident or injury, she is to be removed. Elena entered, guided by a slender cane. She wore a simple cream-colored dress. Her eyes were a soft, clouded gray, staring forward at nothing. She didn't look like a threat, yet Salvatore felt a strange prickle of nerves. The weight of silk. Sit, Salvatore commanded. Elena didn't flinch. She navigated the space with a grace that suggested she could hear the dimensions of the room. Thank you for the work, Mr. Marino, she said. Her voice was like silk. Salvatore pushed a jacket across the desk. It had a delicate tear near the lapel. The fabric is a rare blend. I was told you are the only one who can fix it. Elena reached out. Her fingertips danced over the weave. Vicuña and silk, she murmured. It's a beautiful weight, but the tear is jagged. It didn't happen by chance. The fibers were pulled with force. Salvatore narrowed his eyes. Just fix it. I don't pay for forensic analysis. The scent of lavender. Elena smiled. I apologize. I simply speak what the fabric tells me. For the next week, the mansion changed. The smell of gun oil and tobacco was joined by the faint scent of lavender that Elena carried. Salvatore found himself walking past the drawing room more often than necessary. Through the cracked door, he watched her work. She didn't use a magnifying glass. She worked by feel, her needles moving with a rhythmic precision. He began to wonder what she saw when she touched things. Did she feel the history of the house? He found himself drawn to her stillness, the velvet darkness. One evening, a violent thunderstorm broke. Salvatore, unable to sleep, wandered into the drawing room. He expected to find it empty, but Elena was there, sitting in the dark. You aren't afraid of the dark? He asked. The dark is my home, Don Salvatore. It's the light that can be overwhelming. In the dark, everything is equal. Salvatore moved closer. In my world, nothing is equal. Elena turned her head toward his voice. And which are you, the man who takes or the man who hides? The question was a challenge, but in the velvet darkness, it felt like an invitation to be honest. The language of scars. I do what is necessary to survive, Salvatore replied. Survival leaves marks. Elena stood up, her cane clicking. Marks are just stories that the body refuses to forget. I have many stories on my hands. Scars from needles. They are my map. She walked toward him, stopping inches away. He could smell the metallic scent of rain. I can hear your heart, she replied. It's beating like a trapped bird. Why is a man as powerful as you so afraid of a woman who cannot even see him? Salvatore felt his breath hitch. People look at me and see a monster. Elena reached out a hand. I don't look with my eyes. May I? The first touch. Salvatore lowered his head slightly. Yes, he rasped. Elena's fingers touched his jaw. They were cool and soft. She moved slowly, as if she were inspecting a rare tapestry. Her fingertips traveled upward, finding the start of the scar. She didn't flinch. She traced a jagged line, her thumb brushing over the damaged skin with tenderness. Salvatore closed his eyes. It was the first time in 2 decades that a human hand had touched his face without violence. "It's a deep story," she whispered, "but it isn't a monster story. It feels like survival." The breach, Salvatore's eyelid. It ran down the scar, meeting her fingertip. Elena paused, her hand lingering on his cheek. The silence was full, but the peace was short-lived. A sudden crash echoed from the foyer. Gunfire shattered the quiet. The rival Moretti family had found a breach. Salvatore's instincts took over. He grabbed Elena's waist, pulling her behind a heavy oak sideboard as bullets shattered the windows. "Stay down," he hissed. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the cold precision of a wolf defending its den. The ghost in the hallway. He drew his weapon. Elena crawled toward the service stairs behind the tapestry. "Go. Now!" He watched her disappear into the shadows, her knowledge of the dark now her greatest advantage. Salvatore moved with a fury he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just fighting for his empire. He was fighting for the only person who had ever touched his soul without recoiling. He was a ghost in the hallways, striking from the darkness. One by one, the Moretti soldiers fell. He was a man possessed. The choice. By the time the sirens wailed, the house was silent. Salvatore found Elena in the cellar. She was trembling. When he approached, she reached out. He took her hand, his knuckles bloody. She pulled a clean handkerchief from her kit and began to wipe his hand. "The suit is finished," she said softly. "No one will ever know it was torn." Salvatore looked at her. "The suit doesn't matter anymore, Elena." He realized then that he couldn't let her go back to a world where she was just a seamstress. And he couldn't stay in a world where he was just a ghost. The North Wing. The aftermath was efficient. Salvatore's men cleaned the blood. Luca appeared, his arm in a sling. The leak came from the transport team. Salvatore didn't look up from Elena's finished work. Find the leak. But Luca, move Elena to the North Wing. It's the most secure. Luca hesitated. The council will ask questions. Having a civilian in the inner sanctum. Salvatore finally looked up, his scarred face illuminated by the sun. "Let them ask. I am the Don. My sanctum is whoever I choose to keep in it. Anger is a fabric." Elena settled into the North Wing. Salvatore joined her in the evenings. They walked the gravel paths together. He told her things he had never told another living soul, about his childhood and the brother who betrayed him. "Anger is a heavy fabric to wear, Salvatore," she said one evening. "It's stiff and it doesn't breathe." He stopped. "Without the anger, I'm just a target." She reached up and touched the scar again. "No," she whispered. "Without the anger, you're just a man." The golden thread. The syndicate was restless. They saw Salvatore's attachment to a blind girl as a liability. A meeting was called. Salvatore prepared to leave, wearing the suit Elena had mended. He went to her room to say goodbye. "Take this," she said, handing him a small piece of red silk embroidered with a golden thread. "It's a knot of protection. Remember who you are, not what they want you to be." He tucked the silk into his breast pocket, right over his heart. The lion's den. The meeting was tense. The heads of the 4 other families sat around the table. "You've gone soft, Marino," sneered Valley, the youngest on, hiding with a broken face and a blind girl. Salvatore sat in silence, feeling the silk in his pocket. "My face is a reminder of what happens to those who think they can take what is mine," he said. "And the girl, she sees more than all of you. I am not soft. I am focused." The room went cold. The meeting ended without bloodshed, but the war was starting. The ambush. On the drive back, a black SUV pulled alongside. Gunfire erupted. The car crashed into a concrete barrier. Salvatore's world went black. When he came to, the smell of gasoline was thick. Luca was unconscious. Salvatore kicked his door open. 2 masked men approached. He reached for his weapon, but his shoulder was dislocated. He fell for the red silk. His fingers brushed it, and adrenaline hit him. He fought like a man who had everything to lose, taking down the first man before security arrived. The proposal of flight. He made it back to the estate, battered. He went straight to Elena. "You're hurt," she said, smelling the copper. He collapsed into a chair. "I'm fine," he lied. She felt the blood on his shoulder. "You're always fighting. When does it stop?" Salvatore took her hands. "It stops when we leave. There's a villa in Switzerland. No one knows about it. Tonight, Salvatore Marino dies in an accidental fire. Only the man you know will get on that plane." The funeral pyre. They move fast. Luca helped set the stage. Explosives were rigged. Salvatore stood in his study one last time, looking at the portraits of his ancestors. He took a lighter and watched the flame. He looked at Elena, waiting by the door. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the day I touched your face," she replied. He dropped the lighter. The fire spread. They walked out the back as the first explosions rocked the foundation. The night sky turned orange. The glacial lake. The flight was silent. Salvatore clutched the red silk. They arrived at the villa, a stone house overlooking a glacial lake. The air smelled of pine and snow. It was a world away from the violent streets. Elena walked onto the terrace. "It's quiet here," she said. Salvatore wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his scarred cheek against her hair. "No one will find us here," he promised. "We can just be—" The green of the moss. Months passed. Salvatore's beard grew out, softening the lines of his scar. He spent his days chopping wood. He learned to navigate her world, the world of sounds and scents. He realized that for all his power, he had been the one who was truly blind. One afternoon, Elena sat on the porch. "I never asked you what color your eyes are." Salvatore smiled. "They're green, like the moss on the north side of the house." Elena nodded. "I thought so. They feel like the earth." The hiker. The piece was interrupted by a hiker who appeared on the trail. Salvatore's hand instinctively went to his concealed knife. The man was young, a tourist. Salvatore gave the man directions and watched him leave. Later that night, he sat by the fire. "What is it?" Elena asked. "I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop." Elena took his hand. "The shoe has already fallen, Salvatore. The door is locked." He looked at her and realized she was right. He was waiting for a ghost. The final note. The following year, a small package arrived at a post office box in the village. It was addressed to the Seamstress. Inside was a gold coin and a note. "The families are gone. Valley tried to take too much, and the others ate him. Rest in peace, Don." Salvatore read the note and then burned it. He walked back to the villa, where Elena was waiting with a surprise. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "There is a new story beginning," she whispered. The silent guest. Elena's pregnancy brought a new kind of silence to the house, one filled with anticipation. Salvatore, however, was haunted by his reflection. He spent hours in the workshop he'd built, carving a cradle from white oak. Every time he struck a chisel, he wondered if the violence of his past would manifest in his child. Elena would find him in the sawdust, her hands finding the tension in his shoulders. "The wood is strong, Salvatore," she would say. "Just like you. It doesn't remember the storm that grew it, only the hands that shape it now." The ghost of Florence. An old man arrived in the village asking for the woman with the touch of ghosts. It was Alberto, an ancient weaver from Florence who had taught Elena. He had been sent by a museum to find the only person capable of restoring the lover's lament, a 15th century tapestry. Salvatore was suspicious, checking the perimeter for tales, but Elena was lit from within. For the first time, she wasn't just mending his world. She was reconnecting with her own. Salvatore realized that to keep her hidden was another form of cage, the threads of memory. As Elena worked on the tapestry in the sunroom, Salvatore watched her fingers fly. She discovered a secret. The original weaver had used a specific knot to hide a message in the border. It says, "Hope is a choice," Elena translated, her fingertips reading the centuries-old bumps. Salvatore sat beside her, helping her sort the silk threads by texture. He realized that his life was like the tapestry, full of snags and bloodstains, but capable of being rewoven into something meaningful. The first cry. A blizzard trapped them in December. When Alera's labor began, there was no way to reach the village doctor. Salvatore, the man who had overseen hundreds of deaths, had to facilitate a life. In the firelight, guided by Alera's calm voice, he delivered their daughter. When the baby, Chiara, finally cried, Salvatore wept. He held the tiny girl, her skin perfect and unblemished. The scar on his face felt like a badge of the long road he had traveled to reach this moment of pure, untainted light. The shadow in the village. 3 years of peace were cracked when Salvatore saw a black sedan with tinted windows idling near the village square. He recognized the driver, not a mobster, but an investigator named Rossi. The authorities were sniffing around the death of Salvatore Marino. Salvatore spent the night cleaning his old knives, the predator in him waking up. Elena found him in the dark. If you fight them like a Don, you become a Don again, she warned. Fight them as a man who has everything to lose. The choice. Luca sent a courier. The dental records from a mansion fire had been flagged as a forgery. The Italian government wanted a body or a prisoner. Salvatore looked at Chiara playing with a wooden bird, and then at Elena. He could run, turning them into fugitives, or he could end the game. He realized that the only way to truly die as a Don was to surrender the one thing the Don valued, his power. He drafted a letter containing the encryption keys to the syndicate's hidden accounts. The blind lead. The authorities moved on the villa at dawn. Salvatore didn't reach for a gun. Instead, he and Elena led Chiara through a hidden cellar tunnel that emerged in a dense pine thicket. The mountain was covered in fog. Close your eyes, Salvatore, Elena whispered. Listen to the wind against the rock face. That is the path. Using the sensory techniques she had taught him over the years, they moved through the unseeable terrain, evading the tactical teams without firing a single shot. The meeting of two worlds. Salvatore arranged a meeting with Rossi in a quiet cathedral across the border. He walked in without guards, his face fully visible in the candlelight. Rossi was stunned by the scar, then by the man's composure. Salvatore pushed a ledger of accounts across the table. This is the wealth of 5 families. It's enough to fund your department for a century. In exchange, Salvatore Marino stays dead. This man you see before you has no name. Rossi looked into Salvatore's green eyes and saw no monster, only a father. The final stitch. The deal was struck. The accounts were drained. The syndicate's infrastructure collapsed under the weight of the evidence Salvatore provided, and the case was permanently resolved as a death in absentia. Salvatore returned to the villa. He took his matte black semi-automatic, the one that had saved him the mansion, and buried it beneath the roots of an old apple tree. He felt a weight lift from his chest that he hadn't realized he was carrying for 20 years. A new pattern. Years passed like the steady rhythm of a loom. Chiara grew tall, inheriting her father's stubbornness and her mother's intuition. She knew her father had a story on his face, but to her, the scar was as natural as the bark on a tree. Salvatore became the village's unofficial protector, a man of few words who fixed broken fences and helped the elders with their harvest. He was no longer the Don. He was the man from the stone house, the light in the dark. The sun was setting over the lake, casting a golden glow that made the snow-capped peaks look like they were on fire. Salvatore sat on the porch, a tray of tea between him and Elena. Chiara is at the lake, Elena said, her head tilted. She skipped 3 stones. The 4th one sank. Salvatore marveled, even after all these years, at her sight. He looked at Elena. Her hair was silvered at the temples, but her skin was as radiant as the day she walked into his study. He took her hand and placed it on his cheek, right over the ridge of the scar. "Do you remember the first time you did this?" he asked. "I remember the fear in your skin," she said. "It felt like a fortress under siege. And now," she traced a line, her touch lingering on his temple, "now it feels like a garden. The soil is deep and the walls are gone." Chiara ran up the path, holding a handful of wildflowers. She climbed into Salvatore's lap, pressing her face against his. "You smell like wood smoke, Papa." Salvatore closed his eyes, pulling them both close. He realized that for most of his life, He had been a man living in a tomb, protecting a hoard of gold and blood. It had taken a woman who could see nothing to show him everything. The darkness settled over the mountains. But for the first time in his life, Salvatore didn't reach for a light. He didn't need it. He was finally, truly